Hi everybody, this is Hero, and in this video I'd like to talk about an alternative Disc Priest talent tree for Dragonflight. I'm a little concerned about Blizzard's style of this new talent direction. I love parts of it, and I'm upset about other parts. So the portions I like are them bringing back iconic abilities and trying to be creative in some of the new skills that add power. Where I'm concerned is the design that is largely connecting lines and restricting players' access to talents and choices, forcing people to take, for example, things like Holy Nova or Prayer of Healing if you're looking at a Holy Priest, when they maybe don't want to. And I think there's just a better way to go about it. So in this video, I'm going to present a alternative style and walk you through the logic that I'm bringing to it. And to do so, I have first a talent tree and also a document that I'm going to go back and forth between so you can see exactly what I'm talking about in the design. So let's get started. I'm just going to get rid of my video so that you can see all of the material, and then we'll have a conclusion at the end. So to begin with, I've prepared a talent tree that includes 3 major sections. There are, within each section, a certain number of points that you can allocate. In the first section, you can see here there's various rows, and that has a total of 23 points that you could apply. And then here on the right, I'm suggesting that in order to move to the next section, you have to have used 10 points in each. In the second section, we have, again, some familiar skills. I'll talk about some of these things in a minute. Up to about 28 points worth in this section, and to move on to the next one, you have to have spent at least 20 total in the entire tree. And then finally, we have some fairly strong iconic abilities at the bottom end, and I'll talk about all of these in time. Before I do so, I just want to note a couple of pieces. First, you can see the baseline priest spells that are all priests, in my view, would have access to. Power Infusion being something that is not awkward, because I think it's just better to bake in to the priest. If they give it to somebody else, they get 100% of the effect. So getting that legendary Twin Suns effect. For Disc, the main piece is their atonement healing and their shielding. So their mastery is associated with that, and their atonement as a baseline is going to use the spells heal and flash heal to apply 10-second ones. The rest of the talent tree is going to modify that. So Shadow Men will take up flash heal and replace it. Power Word Shield will replace heal. But just as a baseline, this is what it would look like if you hadn't selected anything. And the red lines are showing where you need at least 1 point in a previous talent to get access to it. The green lines are showing what I'm calling affinity. If you fill up the full point allocation in both talents, you get a bonus. And I'll talk about the bonus that's specific to each of these as we move through the sections. So let's get going. I'm just going to move over to the document here, and you can see, and we'll go back and forth and talk about each of them. So in row 1, we have Absorption, which is I'm thinking of as a 5-point tier, and you can see the basic layout and style that I have in mind to help, again, give players some options, so that if they're not interested in taking a certain set of talents, or they want to avoid a certain kind of mechanic within the kit, they can apply these points in other spaces. Absorption, Desperate Prayer grants you a shield, and then subsequent ranks do the following. You gain every 10 seconds a shield for 2% of your max life, stacking up to 10%. You absorbs, reflect 3% of the damage, like the Disc Priest Legendary. Smite causes a party array member to gain a shield for 1% of your max life, and then 10% mastery. Shadow Mend is replacing Flash Heal. It heals for a certain amount, and then there's a couple of other ranks here that can boost the utility or value of Shadow Mend. The second rank is Masochism. The third rank applies Atonement to 2 additional party array members near the target, so it cleaves Atonement spreading when you cast Shadow Mend. You don't cleave the heal, just the Atonement. And then Power Word Shield is replacing heal. Oh, I should note for Shadow Mend, instead of it being the 10-second baseline for Flash Heal, you get 20 seconds of Atonement whenever you cast Shadow Mend. So slightly more efficient than Power Word Shield, which is 18, but nevertheless, both of these are your main way of applying your atonement to friendly targets. So powered shield, again, shields for a certain number of spell power percentage, and then rank 2 is the mana restoration from the talent, and rank 3 is a cleave for powered shield. So when you shield, you also shield an additional party or raid member within 15 yards of the target. I think offering these kinds of little powerful nodes at the bottom end of these talents gives people a lot of things to think about. And you'll see as these start to fit together without the rest of the tree. Do I want to prefer Shadow Mend and cleaving atonements? Do I want to prefer cleaving actual shields? Maybe there's a mix. Maybe I want access to both for certain circumstances. In any case, it gives you some interesting things to think about. Let's head back to the tree. So then we have Penance, Purge the Wicked, and Rapture. That's in row number 2. Oops. Excuse me. Penance has 3 points that you can allocate. Obviously, the first basic idea is similar. Launch a volley of 3 holy bolts at either a friendly target for a certain percentage of spell power or an enemy target, which will obviously do damage and atone. And that's over 2 seconds. You can move while you're casting it. Rank 2, each bolt spreads either your power word shield if you hit a friendly target, or Shadow Word Pain to a nearby enemy. And this is the baseline effect of Purge the Wicked, but it is modified in a couple of important ways. First of all, it applies to Shadow Word Pain itself, not just Purge the Wicked. Secondly, each of the bolts, so in this case the baseline is 3 applications, are spreading, if you want on a friendly target, the shields that are present on them, or your power word shield that's present on them, or on an enemy target, spreading Shadow Word Pain 3 times to different related enemies. I think this is important because the gameplay for any AoE is a lot of awkward multi-dotting, and if you're in the middle of your ramp as Disc Priest, you get this moment where your dots are going to fall off, or there's a tension between that is not really interesting gameplay. It's just frustrating. So I like the idea that pressing Penance is also doing a lot of utility work if you want it, giving you access to more spreading and more dots or hots, however you like it, but you don't have to do a lot of target swapping to make that work. You can still, tab target and spread it naturally, but you can also use Penance and not feel like I'm pressing this button here, but I really wanted to be spreading more atonements or getting more dots out. It kind of helps to sync up that gameplay. Third rank, Penance launching 3 additional bolts. This is related to some, inspired by legendary effects and the first talent row, Castigation. I think offering a kind of a doubling of the effect of Penance as the final rank really gives it some oomph if you want to go down this route. But again, if you want to avoid using Penance, you can. If you want to prefer something else altogether, it's up to you as the player. There are some powerful effects, but you don't have to feel inclined to take them. Purge the Wicked replaces Shadow Word Pain as it normally does, and it does the following kinds of things. Essentially a longer life, so 20 seconds on the dot. Rank 2 gives us a kind of execute effect. It refreshes to 20 seconds on targets above 80% health or below 20% health. I think this idea is really valuable as a utility side. As I was just mentioning, sometimes our dots fall off and we want to be doing other things. We're in the middle of a ramp. I like the idea that in execute you can be focusing your attention on casting Shadow Word Death and moving into other buttons and utility while your dots are still going. And that when you start a pack, you know that the first few ticks of your dot on those fresh targets are going to retain that 20-second duration. I like that gives Purge the Wicked a unique kind of idea, separate from Shadow Word Pain. And then we have the first affinity, which is that when you have access to, when you've put 3 points in Penance and 2 in Purge the Wicked, you gain this ability. When Purge the Wicked is spread by Penance, the priest is healed for 1% of their max life and gains 1% critical strike chance for 10 seconds, up to a maximum of 5% crit. So you can see how certain types of gameplay might prefer this. So you have to be spreading it. So you're looking at probably a Mythic Plus setting where this would be useful, because you're going to obviously have lots of mobs and spread it. Or in a raid encounter, you might select this. If you know the boss you're fighting has tons of ads and you're going to get a lot of value or uptime, maybe it's an arena or a battleground where you know you'll also have targets to spread it to consistently. But maybe you don't want it if you're trying to play an arena match and you're not interested in having Purge the Wicked mess up your CCs, or it's a single target raid encounter, or I don't know if Tyrannical is going to be retained in Mythic Plus, but you don't really need Purge the Wicked for damage. You're doing other things. In that case, you can avoid it. But it's just a nice little bonus. Getting healed for 1% of your max life adds up over time in certain kinds of encounters. Again, up to the player. You don't have to access this, but it's here. Rapture is the other one in this row, and Rapture currently is like a super buff shield, and we retain some of that flavor here. You know, you immediately power word shield yourself, and for the next 8 seconds, it gives more absorption, same kind of 1.5 minute CD. But here's the rank 2 that I think is interesting. When it expires, it causes all party or raid members within 40 yards to gain a 50% spell power absorb shield. And you could adjust that number up and down to give it some balance. But what I like about Rapture, this second rank specifically, is it gives the kind of utility to Rapture that we haven't seen, which is Rapture often gets used just as a sort of extra builder for your ramps. You know, you double power word radiance, and then you're shadow mending, or if you have Rapture up, maybe you're rapturing. It used to be that Rapture and Spirit Shell were in competition with each other, and evangelism, so it just had this strange usage. But I like the idea that what Rapture offers you on the back end is something that's just a nice, solid throughput bonus that you don't have to worry about, and it gives a little oomph. It gives you a special reason to press it, knowing that even if you don't get all of the value out of those 8 seconds, you're getting a strong throughput piece at the back end. So maybe this is good in lots of circumstances, and maybe it would need to be tuned, but you can always tune that spell power number up or down for the rank 2 to see whether the value is there. But I like that kind of flavor for the game. Okay, now we get to the next rank, which is Psychic Song, Spirit Shell, and Power Barrier. And you can see here that Power Word Shield is required to gain access to Rapture. 1 point in Rapture is required to gain access to Spirit Shell and Barrier. We'll see this throughout the piece. Psychic Song. So again, Scream is baseline. So Psychic Song replaces Psychic Scream. It causes 5 enemies within 8 yards to cower in place instead of fleeing, disorienting them for 8 seconds. Damage may interrupt the effect, and it's a 30-second CD. So this is like our talent, right? Instead of 1 minute. And they're cowering in place, sort of like the warrior talent, instead of running like crazy. And then the second rank is when Psychic Song expires, reduce the movement speed of affected targets 50%. So you get a snare on the back end. And again, you can see where Mythic Plus, maybe this is useful for certain kinds of affixes. Maybe in Arena, this is what you want because you want a special powerful utility button and you need the snare. But it's up to you. Spirit Shell, 10 seconds. Again, similar gameplay. Penance, Powered Radiance, and Atonement creates absorb shields for 80% of their value instead of healing. We've seen this before. But the rank 2 I'm saying is, while Spirit Shell is active, Smite is instant cast. So often in Disc Priest ramps, what you have is a laying out of atonements through spamming Shield, Shadow Mend, or Radiance. And then you would have your Spirit Shell into Smite casts, or some combination of Penance, Smite, Mind Blast, Mind Games, all the different tools we've had over the years to smash out as much atonement healing as we possibly can. And one of the things that's tough about it is, if you're using Spirit Shell, it's really vital that you can stand and cast after you hit that button, because everything you do is baked into that window, And if you don't do it properly or you have to move for mechanics, it's difficult because you lose value. So what I'm suggesting is, why don't we add on the second portion of this talent the ability for Smite to be instant cast in that duration. Not only does that mean you'll get more smites out, it means that your spirit shells will be more consistent and effective, and it gives you a little more flexibility on what spells you want to be using because you don't have to stand and cast. So I think this is the kind of gameplay that offers something really strong, and a player's like, whoa, hold on a second. If I go down this route, I can see how to use this. I can see where this would be really powerful. Maybe some bosses or battlegrounds or Mythic Plus, you can stand and cast, so you don't need access to an instant cast smite. It's not as beneficial. Or you have other abilities you want to be pressing that are going to be doing a lot of the atonement healing during Spirit Shell. So you'd only need the first rank of it. But this gives you something to think about. And again, Power Word Barrier, I just have as its regular old self here in the talents. I just realized that I spelt Sprit Shell instead of Spirit Shell, which is somewhat embarrassing, but we'll continue. You know what I meant. So at this point, you needed to have picked at least 10 points worth in this top portion to gain access to the next part. You can see that Psychic Song is at least 1 point is required to gain access to Mindbender Dominant Mind. Let's move down and take a look at this next section here. So the first row, Mindbender, Dominant Mind, and Power Word Radiance. Similar things we've seen in the kit, but let's see how I've modified them. Mindbender replaces Shadow Fiend. It does the same kinds of mana stuff that Shadow Fiend does. And the rank 2 that I'm suggesting is that your Mindbender's attacks cleave up to 4 additional enemies near your target. This is related to that legendary effect Shadow Word Prism, which makes your Death and Mind Blast cause your Shadow Fiend to jump behind and cleave. I think it's just better if Mindbender's base attacks cleave, giving you more consistency, because depending on what you're doing in a dungeon or a raid, if you're using Shadow Flame Prism, Death isn't always really that useful. The uptime isn't great. And Mind Blast cooldown is sometimes restrictive. I know in the new Dragonflight talents you get 7.5 seconds off of Mind Blast as a 2-point talent, but you still aren't going to get a lot of casts. And if you have to do something else, you won't be using Mind Blast efficiently. And that's the kind of gameplay that feels bad when you've specced into this ability and there's so much tension that you can't really use it the way you want to. That's frustrating. I think just add a rank that gives natural cleave to your Mindbender. Therefore, you're always getting, in the cases where you want it, lots of mana regeneration back from those extra attacks as it cleaves, and lots of extra atonement in those moments as well. So it makes it a really nice bursty CD. Dominant Mind. You may also control your own character while Mind Control is active. We've seen this before. It has a 2-minute CD and it can't be used against players. But then the rank 2 would be something like Mind Control lasts 15 seconds longer and causes your victims to pulse spell power, whatever, shadow damage every 3 seconds to all enemies targets within 15 seconds. So turning Mind Control into a potential DPS button in those circumstances where you want to be able to gain control of some mob to help CC, but you don't really need the mob to do anything, and it would be nice to have a little bit of extra burst damage. I think this is a cool effect, but people might not even care for it. Like if you're PvPing, you need access to Mind Control, so you wouldn't even take Dominant Mind in this case. But again, those options are available. If you wanted just the ability to CC something, you can take the 1 point in this, and in a dungeon setting, you can CC a dangerous mob and still have control. If you want the extra burst, it's available as well. Power Word Radiance, similar to how we see it. So in this case, Power Word Radiance usually gives about 60% of atonement, so I've set it at about 12 seconds baseline. And I've set the baseline also to give you 2 charges with a 20-second recharge. And then rank 2, I would suggest that Power Word Radiance applies atonements for the full 20 seconds that we're used to seeing from Shadowman, in the talent. build that I'm suggesting. That just means like, look, if you're in an environment that your double power word radiance is not setting you up for long enough ramps, or you need them to produce long, consistent ramps for you, or you need the longer atonement extension, then you can spec into this. But in some circumstances, like maybe you're in a raid or in a dungeon where one power word radiance cast is getting you your atonements for enough time, you don't need access to this rank, and so it's not relevant. But this is the kind of thing, guys, if you're getting a whole talent point, it needs to be doing something potentially really productive. Otherwise, it needs to be something that the player can just avoid. They don't need to take it if they don't want it. All right. Suppression, dark thoughts, and light thoughts. And here I've been a little bit creative. I don't know if it's paid off, but you can tell me in the comments. Pain suppression is its normal self, reducing damage taken just as a 1 point, but it is going to be connected to some other things down the road. Dark thoughts and light thoughts is a bit of a play on Dark Archangel and Archangel, which are PvP talents. But in this case, it's a bit of a kiss curse idea, and if you connect them together, you get a bonus. So Dark Thought says reduce your max HP by 10%, but you get Atonement permanently on yourself, so you never have to cast Atonement on yourself, you get it permanently. Rank 2, Penance has 2 charges, but can no longer be cast on friendly targets. So I like the idea of Dark Thoughts because what it does is it says to the player, can you deal with these curse ideas, this idea of never casting Penance on a friendly target? In a lot of gameplay, we don't press Penance on friendly targets by and large because it's a throughput loss, since we've built up in a raid specifically, or in a dungeon, we built up 5 or 6 or 10 atonements or 20, and we need that penance to be punching out lots of atonement healing. Maybe in something like PvP, losing 10% max health is just a gigantic problem. So we don't really want access to Dark Thoughts anyways. Light Thoughts, on the other side, your spells apply atonement for 5 seconds less, but it increases your haste for 5%. So this is the kind of flip side. Maybe you're in an environment where you're okay with the atonement production or application as it is, and you don't need the extension. So you can do with 5 seconds less. So instead of 20 seconds, only getting 15 out of Shadow Mend, or I guess it would be 12 out of your Power Word Shield. Something like that, 12 or 13. And the second rank of that, when you cast Smite, a second Smite will be cast a moment later at 50% effectiveness at the same target. Essentially, an additional cast of Smite, but it's like that Holy Nova bonus that you get if you hit 3 targets. It casts another Holy Nova at the location for 50% effectiveness. I think this is a useful way to give you a buff to Smite without making it overpowered. And again, just more potential atonement healing, more damage. When you put them together, here's the affinity. Smite and Penance increase your movement speed by 15% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. I like this idea of an alternative kind of utility, like, do I need the movement speed? Is this the kind of bonus I need to go after? Some encounters, the answer will be yes. And you're like, you know what? I need to be going quicker all the time. It's just Feather, and we will have Feather in a second, but Feather isn't offering enough. I'm too slow as this class. I don't have a blink. You know, we're losing potentially all of the Covenant stuff. So we've been used to having Night Fae blinks and Venthyr teleports and all kinds of stuff. So I think it's interesting to add this as a bonus for what will be more Penance casts and more Smite casts, right? Think about how that second Smite, which hits, is going to keep this buff up as well. So interesting options. Let's keep going. So now we get to like the broader section of part 2. And again, if there's no connecting point, there's no requirement to take it. So in even the green ones, you could take just Light Thoughts if you preferred it, or just Dark Thoughts. You don't have to go all the way down. Here's Pain Attunement. Let's move our... So Pain Attunement is an affinity with Pain Suppression. So you'd have to put all 3 points into Pain Attunement and also Suppression to get the bonus. Here's the baseline. Reduce damage taken by 3% while you are shielded or have Atonement. So shielded includes almost every single kind of absorbs. So if you've put the points into absorption, which I put up here at the top of the tree, where you're getting some natural passive absorbs as well, this is the sort of thing that would also apply in the case of Pain Attunement. Desperate Prayer cools down 300% faster while you are below 50% health. I think by and large this is probably a slightly weaker talent. If I was going to do an overall check of the talents, this would probably be one of the weaker ones, but it does give you access to rank 3. When you are hit by a melee attack, you take 10% reduced physical damage for 3 seconds, which is the Grace effect, which does not currently exist in my version of Priest. I think it's better to have that as something to talent into if you want some more personal defensive stuff. So that's what Pain Attunement is really trying to do, is give you an entire section of talents that are bound up with your personal health. And obviously Absorption is giving you more shields over time anyway, so I think it's fulfilling that ability to sustain yourself. But those are some Pain Attunements, and then the affinity that goes between the two of them if you have all the points. Pain Suppression also applies to 4 friendly party or raid members near your target at 50% effectiveness. So that's 20% DR from Pain Suppression. I'll just go up here so you can read it. And it lasts for 4 seconds on the 4 other targets that are nearby your Pain Suppression target. This is actually pretty strong when you think about what you're getting. If you spec all the way into Pain Attunement, you get the personal side, which maybe is slightly lackluster, but you do it, but still useful, but you do it to gain access to this really powerful 3-minute CD applying to more targets. But maybe you don't care about the extra targets. Maybe you do. Maybe this is too strong and it needs to be changed. The point is, it gives you that benefit for going all the way in. Lenience, we've seen this before. Atonement reduces damage taken by 3%. I just have a caveat here. Multiple leniences do not stack. I think this is kind of important because if you just stacked your raid with 4 disc priests and they all had access to lenience, which I think is currently in the Dragonflight talent stuff, then you would potentially be reducing all damage taken by like 12% for anyone who has Atonement. That's kind of crazy. Purification. So what I've decided to do is give you baseline Purify, which is just removing a magic effect. And in my version of Purification, the first point gives you dispelling not just magic, but also disease and curse effects. So it's going one extra step. Usually we just have magic and disease. This is granting you curse effect. And then the second one is bringing back that old PvP talent, giving Purification 2 charges, but at CD, I'm going to increase it by 15 seconds. So I like the idea of priests having a bit of flavor of extra purifies. So being really skilled at dispelling magic and getting rid of bad effects. And I think that's important for the kit and for what priest offers. Angelic Feather, similar stuff, gives a feather. The rank 2 is making it kind of AoE, so you can hit all targets and move everybody, and you lose one of the charges. So 10-yard radius, you can imagine your raid or your arena group stacked, and you use feather, boom, suddenly everyone's moving 40% faster. I think this is a kind of cool, unique idea that should be in the game. Divine Plead, this is where we take a look at why we had heal and flash heal in the game to begin with. So our flash heal, and if you take Shadow Men, it converts it, now heals the target for 60%, 5% of their max HP, but has a 30-second CD. This is your greater heal PvP talent, reimagined. And the idea here is, if you want to take Shadow Men, Divine Plea will be a heavy limiter on how often you can use it. And we have, even in the Shadow Men talents that I showed you, we're not cleaving our Shadow Mens the way we cleave Power Word Shields. So you can't like double up on this and get 65% of max HP for 3 targets. You lose access to the regular atonement application of Shadowman, but if you don't take Shadowman at all, you still retain flash heal, and you can make your flash heal really strong. Instead of it just being a 10-second atonement applicator, it suddenly has this really juicy 30-second CD, almost like a lay on hands style approach. So I think giving some of this flexibility means that when you look at the tree on the whole, the player can say, hold on a second, can I just do a shield build here and use flash heal as a giant emergency heal every 30 seconds? Or can I still spec into Shadow Mend, but I only want 1 tick of it because I'm going to end up taking Plea down here. I want it to be able to apply 20-second atonements, but I still want to pick up this powerful tool because I can apply most of my stuff with Radiance, and I can spread. I'm going to try spreading my shields around, so I can do a bunch of powered shields and then spread it with a few penances, and I won't worry about using Shadowman so much as an atonement builder. These are, I think, interesting options and applicable for all kinds of different gameplay. Finally, Body and Soul. This is our talent. Powered Shield and Leap of Faith giving us movement speed. Rank 2, our other absorption effects increase the target's movement speed by 20% for 3 seconds. I like this as a way to really amplify movement speed from a priest perspective if you needed it. All absorption effects, so the stuff from absorption that you're getting in the talent tree on yourself. Any spirit shells, any, I guess, divine, powered barrier would count. All your atonement healing, or excuse me, not atonement, that's the spirit shell portion. Anything that gives you another bubble or shield will also proc this effect. Okay, moving forward, we have Silence, Mass Dispel, and Halo as the capstones for this section. And Silence, I think, is returning. In my view, I see it as a Disc Priest talent, though I'm not against it being in Shadow. I think of Silence as being more thematically related to meditation, purification, and, a disciplined person, someone who's not counting on miracles to come down from the heavens, from the gods, but someone who is planned and prepared and focused. So here's Silence, 2 ranks. Silence is the target, prevents them from casting spells for 4 seconds against non-players. It also interrupts spell casting and prevents any spell in that school from being cast for 4 seconds. Instead of 45 seconds, I think it should be a 1-minute CD. Again, in my view, you could have some overlap where maybe Shadow has a 45-second silence. And then rank 2, I've left blank here. I'm not sure why it's blank. I thought I had written something in, but you can imagine how we might modify silence to either cleave, or you could reduce the CD by 30 seconds if you thought you really needed it, that kind of thing. Mass Dispel, similar kind of stuff. Rank 2, it increases the number of targets, so if you thought you're in an environment that really needs it, like a battleground or a raid, where the Mass Dispels can be a cornerstone piece of your strategy, and maybe people are spread and you just need the extra radius, this is something that you could pick up. Similarly, you can think of in arenas or Mythic Plus, maybe you need to dispel quite a few things from targets, both friendly and from targets that are enemies, and they're all spread apart. Halo, I've reimagined, so I don't know if I like this version of it entirely. It might not be balanced very well, but the idea is, instead of it just being holy damage and healing, that it would be damage and shielding for the Disc Priest. So 50% spell power, whatever you want that number to be, it doesn't matter. Shielding reduced beyond 6 targets. I think it fits better with the Disc Priest idea of absorption. And the second part of this would be that all damage from Halo causes atonement healing. And this might be kind of broken. Maybe it would have to be square root tuned. But I really dislike, fundamentally, that in the current game, under the hood, your AoE spells, your Holy Nova, for example, your Mind Seer, your Halo. All of these effects only produce atonement healing on the first target that they hit. I think this is a massive problem that Blizzard needs to solve, and this is one of the ways to do it, is make it so that you have an ability that is specifically designed to do AoE, and that's the core AoE part of this kit. There's no other like Holy Nova spell that Disc Priest would gain access to. You don't have Mind Seer. You have to spread your dots in order to do AoE types of things. Otherwise, you're using Penance and Smite to do your main atonement. But there is at least one option where if you wanted to gain massive atonement healing in a burst, you have access to it here on a long CD, but it gives access to the player to all of the benefit of hitting all of those targets. I find it very frustrating that you're in a Mythic Plus or you're in a raid with a bunch of ads, and you intuitively think Mind Searing here should produce a lot of atonement healing because I'm hitting all these targets, but the game is coded so that it only affects one. And I just think that's a massive flavor fail. So here's maybe my version of it that would reintroduce it in an interesting way. Let's get into the final section. So here we have what I think of as some cornerstone potential ideas. And again, you would need to have spent 20 points over the course of the entire tree to gain access to this. I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, but I envision the tree working. Oh yeah, I say on the right side here that there's 1 point required to move down between these rows. So you have to at least pick one of Absorption, Shadowman, and Power Word Shield to gain access to these, and so on and so forth. Just so that there's at least some retention of the old system of talents where you're gaining access piece by piece, and you don't have to stay there, but you do need to take something of that. And this, of course, opens up as you move into these sections. It's not just 3 options across, but you gain potential options here that can move you to the next row. But I do think it's kind of valuable to have that form of limitation, but it's still quite broad. Whereas in the current system, there's like an entire track in the Dragonflight talents that you have to take, and there's no mixing or matching. There's no ability for you to gain a certain number of points and then swoop over and grab other ones. So I think limiting it is useful, but not to the same degree that we have in the current game. Anyways, to the final section. Row 8, Shadow Covenant you saw over here and Schism and Binding are the 2 that I have in mind as an affinity. So Shadow Covenant I've modified a little bit, kind of like what they did with Dragonflight. I kind of like where they're going with Shadow Covenant in the game. Make a Shadowy Pact, healing the target and 4 other injured allies within 30 yards, and I have it at 500% spell power, which is a significant increase of what it currently is. And the reason I do that is I put it on a long CD. For 10 seconds, your holy spells cost 100% more and are 20% less effective on a 1-minute CD. So I like the idea of the Kiss Curse, and I think the curse needs to come largely in the mana requirement for holy spells rather than reducing effectiveness, though I think that's important too. The main takeaway is if you lock out, like you do in the current game, holy abilities, you can't use things like Power Word Shield and Dispels or Mass Dispels. There's a lot of stuff you can't do. So I think this is the version of Shadow Covenant that works best for the game, and I want it to be a meaty button. If you are using Shadow Covenant, I want it to hit really hard and heal a lot of people. Next we have Schism, and it's connected to Binding. Schism is its basic form at the moment. You deal damage, and you give a damage amp on the target. And then I want there to be an extra utility. When it expires, you restore 3% of your max mana. So mana management is an important element of Disc Priest. In a lot of the versions of Disc Priest, it is a giant mana hog because you are loading up a ton of atonements and then you are spending a bunch of mana in order to produce atonement healing. So it's very burst oriented, which is fine, but we've tended to allocate mana regeneration effects for those burst windows to make sure that disc doesn't just fall off. And so you get a lot of innervates from druids, for example, from balanced druids. I like the idea of building in mana restoration in this final piece, and there's a few ways we're doing it. Schism is one of them. If you really need the mana, if you're going to be making use of Schism, I think it should give you back max mana, or that should be an option that a player can go with. If it's on 24-second CD, so 3% of your max mana on a 24-second CD is pretty good returns. Then Binding, shield you, your target, and another friendly target within 20 yards for whatever spell power makes sense. Instant cast, 1 minute CD, and applies 10 seconds of atonement. This is a take on Binding Heal that, again, I'm trying to play with the flavor of a Schism being something that tears people apart, and Binding being something that brings people together. I like Binding Heal as an idea that it's a kind of a natural cleave, but I think it should be shielding. Like, again, just make it efficient for Disc Priest. The buttons they're pressing, if it's not through their focused atonement healing, then it needs to be offering something that isn't immediately going to be eaten up by all the other throughput healers where they get, perfect, powerful rejuvenations or massive miracle heals like Serenity. All those things are great. I think Disc Priest needs to be able to augment that so that their stuff is not immediately just overhealing. And then rank 2 would be that Binding's CD is reduced by 0.5 seconds whenever you cast Power Word Shield. So just giving you a little bit of that flavor of getting back your big, powerful ability, Binding Heal or Binding Shield if you like, by casting some of your rotational spells. Again, but if you didn't need it, like if you weren't going to focus on Power Word Shield, and instead your focus was going to be on Shadow Mend, then maybe you don't care about this. And maybe, but maybe you think that the affinity is strong enough that you want access to this as well. So these are all the kinds of factors that would make you decide between picking up Schism, Binding, or leaving it alone. And the affinity is Mastery and Crit increased by 3% each, which these kinds of stat things are usually quite strong. Okay, on to the final row. And in the final row, we have what I'm calling Umbral Intensity, Light's Wrath, which is a iconic Legion ability that we're retaining, and Greater Fade, which is perhaps an underappreciated ability, but I think is exceptionally strong in a number of the kinds of gameplay that we experience in WoW. Umbral Intensity. Your Shadow Fiend is now a permanent pet, but your holy spells have a baseline CD of 2 seconds reduced by haste. The idea here is to offer, again, another kind of Kiss Curse within Disc Priest. I really think Disc is that spec that you want a bunch of Kiss Curse effects in, isn't it? It's both light and dark, and these are in tension with one another, and the skill of the player in managing that tension is what makes the flavor of the spec so powerful. So you'll notice we have Mindbender access as well, and also Mindbender Cleave that we talked about. These are all built into this same Umbral Intensity, so they all synergize together with this Mindbender if you wanted it. But you're forced to take Shadow Covenant to gain access to this. You don't obviously have to use Shadow Covenant, but this would be the sort of smoothing of Disc Priest rotation. So if you have a permanent Shadow Fiend, you are probably leaning towards using Shadow Mend to build your atonements, but you will have permanent throughput on your atonements. So instead of it being completely burst oriented, you now also gain access to this piece here. But all of our healing from holy spells is going to come at a cost of a CD. So you need to now weave in your Power Word shields if you want to use Power Word shields. Your abilities like Smite and Penance are now going to be on CD for 2 seconds every time you use them. So you would have to weave those in as well. There are some things like Halo, for example, would also have a slightly longer CD. Some of those things wouldn't matter. Binding, for example, wouldn't matter because it's already a minute so a few more seconds isn't a problem. Schism would not be affected. Shadow Men would not be affected. Shadow Covenant would not be as well. Some of these other pieces you can make use of. And then to make it not so bad, make the curse not so horrible, the second rank of Umbral Intensity makes our penance into a shadow spell. And I think we see this in the Dragonflight. This is a good kind of design, by the way, giving access to these variable approaches so that you can lean into shadow types of spells if you want, or you can lean into the holy side for disc. I love that tension in the kit. Penance deals shadow damage, and Shadow Repayne has a chance to make your next penance deal an additional 100% damage, stacking up to 2 times. We have this in the current kit of Disc Priest, and I think this is the better spot for it, rather than it being completely rotational, so that you're waiting all the time for penance to gain this effect. I think it should be something that is tied into an approach that focuses on penance in the shadow side of the kit. Anyways, this is it here. It frees up penance from being limited by the 2-second CD of Umbral Intensity. Light's Wrath. Here's our giant legion massive burst damage ability, which is so cool, and I think players deserve to have access to, and they will be getting access to in Dragonflight, but I think here it makes sense when you're trying to pair it together with some of these other pieces. If you want the Kiss Curse of Umbral Intensity, it's going to affect Light's Wrath, but it won't be as big of a deal because it's already a long CD. Anyways, radiant damage increased by 10% per ally affected by your atonement. Just a solid choice, something that players should feel, yes, I want this. There would be moments where it's not as relevant. If you only have 3 targets, maybe Light's Wrath isn't that valuable, like in Arena. Maybe even in Mythic Plus, if you feel like this isn't going to contribute a lot of atonement healing, or atonement healing isn't as important an element of what I'm doing in a Mythic Plus as a healer. Maybe Light's Wrath doesn't matter. Maybe it's also just busted. This 700% spell power might have to get tuned, but I like the ability. It's good for the game. Finally, Greater Fade. So Fade currently reduces threat. Here in the talent, I think we have this as a conduit currently. You get Fade reduces damage taken by 10% for its duration. This was actually also in Legion, I believe, as well, and I think it's a good idea. Tying to these other pieces, DR or other effects, excellent. And then rank 2, I'm suggesting we can turn Fade into a personal CD, a kind of mini or minor pain suppression that you can put on another player. So giving 10% DR to somebody else if you wanted to. I think that flexibility gives lots of utility and interesting options. Okay, guys, that brings us to the end of this talent tree, and I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. My purpose here is not to say that Blizzard's horrible, but to suggest there are other ways. If we're going to start from scratch and produce new talent trees that are going to stick with the game for a long time, this is the way to go about it, in my view. There needs to be some limiting factors, but we cannot produce talent trees that have giant limitations on every single ability or talent and give us tons of filler talents that we probably won't want or won't use on either the spec side or on the class side. Some of that needs to change, and I think this kind of idea gives players a lot more agency. There's a lot more powerful effects that they have to choose between and craft a build that makes sense for them. And each of the talents that they put in gives them, generally speaking, larger and larger returns for their gameplay. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we will catch you guys again next time. Thanks so much for watching. See you guys.